May 20.
7:03 p.m. on Tuesday, May 28th. We'll call to order this regular meeting of the Easton Reading Region 9 Joint Boards of Education. I'll also call together this regular meeting of the Reading Board of Education. In person, we have Bria, Megan, Amanda, Celeste, and myself. Do we have anyone on Zoom? Okay, none on Zoom.
I'll call the Easton Board of Education meeting together. We have Jennifer Jesus and Wyville, and Alicia Young and Jeff Parker and Randy Hicks.
I'll call Region 9 to the room at 7-3 as well, and we have Karen, Mary Lee, Chris, John, and Tom present.
Great. First item on the agenda is public comments. No one's in the public. Next is board member comments. Any from Reading? Okay.
Region 9, for that one. All right.
Great. Moving along to discussion and possible action. First item on the agenda is the healthy food certification. Mike, would you like to say anything about that?
Sure, so, the motions that, anyone not have a copy of the motions that want one, I have extra copies. These are, pretty standard, motions. They come from, the state Department of Education. Again, these motions relate to our participation in the healthy food certification program. And then the second motion allows the exemption for serving foods that don't comply with the healthy food program at after-school events, namely sporting events and theater events, and any kind of it has to be an event. It can't be a practice or a regularly scheduled occurrence. It has to be something that's simply an event. So again, these are two motions we typically consider each year. Again, for your consideration tonight.
Do we need to say the whole motion?
You need to read the whole motion for each board, please.
Laura, I move that pursuant to Connecticut General Statute, Section 10-215F, the Region 9 Board of Education certifies that all food items, you're really making it hard, all students in the schools under its jurisdiction and not exempt from the Connecticut Nutrition Standards published by the Connecticut State Department of Education will comply with the Connecticut Nutrition Standards during the period of July 1, 2024 through June 30th, 2025. The certification shall include all food offered for sale to students separately from reimbursable meals of all times, from all sources, including but not limited to school stores, vending machines, school cafeterias, culinary programs, and any fundraising activities at school premises sponsored by the school and non-school organizations and groups.
Second.
Thank you.
So motion in Reading.
I move pursuant to the,
I think you can say.
You can say it.
It's
Right.
Yeah.
and so moved. Thank you.
We have a
Second.
second. Thank you, Megan. So moved.
Second.
Great. Any discussion?
Well, the question here, Region 9, handicap.
Yes.
All in favor? Good. Name passes.
Reading, all in favor? Okay, unanimous passes.
Easton. Thank you. James.
Great. Would you like to do that again?
Would Region 9 Board of Education will allow the sale to students, sell to students of food items do not meet Connecticut nutrition standards and beverages not listed in Connecticut section, General Statute, Section 10-221Q, provided that the following conditions are met. Number one, the sale is in connection with an event occurring after the end of regular school day or on the weekend. Number two, the sale is at the location of the event. And number three, the food and beverage items are not sold for vending machine or school store. An event is an occurrence that involves more than just a regularly scheduled practice meeting or extracurricular activity. For example, soccer games, school plays, and interscholastic debates are events, but soccer practices, play rehearsals, debate meetings are not. The regular school day is the period from midnight before to 30 minutes after the end of the official school day. Location means where the event is being held and must be the same place as the food and beverage sales.
Seconded.
Second, John.
Reading,
So moved.
second, thank you.
So moved.
Okay.
Right.
Any discussion? Okay,
Region nine, all in favor? Aye. That's unanimous.
Reading, all in favor? Okay, great, thank you, everyone. Moving along, the next item, I think the 25-26 and the 26-27 district calendars. Easton has already adopted the calendars, so this one is just for Reading and Region 9. Everyone was sent a copy of the proposed calendars via email. Hopefully everyone has reviewed them already. Does anyone have any questions or comments about the calendars? They were, we discussed them in detail at the last joint operating meeting. But if anyone else has questions?
Motion to Region 9 Board of Education adopt the 25-26 and 26-27 district calendars presented.
And second. Region nine. Okay, thank you.
I have a motion to Reading,
I'll make the same motion for Reading.
second, thank you. Any discussion? Great. All right,
Region nine, all in favor? Aye. Passes.
Great. Reading, all in favor? Great. Okay, that passes unanimously. And we can move on to item C, the policy first reading. Number one, adopt a policy contained in the shipment policy manual. And I knew we were going to do these sort of at the same time. And two, repeal of existing policies. Do you want to?
Sure, I can tee it up briefly. The board should have all received a memo from me late last week that brought everybody up to speed as to the process by which the policy committee is operated and its recommendation for wholesale repeal of the preponderance of existing policies and the wholesale adoption of Shipman and Goodwin policies. You've received links to all the documents with all the track changes and all the proposals. And if Dr. McKinnon, if you can pull up the motion that was circulated, that would be helpful.
What did you call it?
I sent it to you and the board chairs, but
It was about 5:42 p.m.
so it's two proposed motions. The first, scroll all the way up. All the way up. The first is that each board move to accept for a first reading the repeal of all existing policies except for the four that are listed there on positive school climate, improvement of superintendent, graduation requirements, and weighted grades. The reasons set forth in the memo that was circulated to the boards. I'm happy to answer anybody's questions about any specific policies, the process, the recommendations, et cetera, or folks to move forward with the two proposed motions. And the second motion, if you want to show it, Jason, is basically to accept first reading the adoption of the four policies that have been proposed by the policy committee and linked in the table below for the benefit of the board secretaries, they can just come. And nobody should have to read all of them.
And Chris, on the, just remind me, the ones that, go back up to the ones that were on the exception, those are, everybody has those. So if we do the motion with all these, everybody's got those.
The motion should be fine. As a practical matter, 6146 and 6146.1 for sure only exist in Region 9,
That's fine. Okay.
but
If they go ahead and pass it, and it doesn't.
it's like saying we're not going to repeal our policy on red hats, like it doesn't.
Okay.
Okay.
Alright.
Just someone want
So
I have
I'll make a,
motion.
if goes, if you want to do.
Motion.
Yeah, I was just saying, do motion. And then.
Well, there's two motions, so I'll have
Have
to
to
do
do the first one?
Sure.
Yeah, so regional, I'll do the first motion, and then we'll.
Do I go ahead and do it?
Yes.
Move that the Region 9 Board of Education, except for first reading, repeal Wallace's policy set 5131.911, positive school climate responsibility, 2141, recruitment of superintendent, 6146, graduation requirements, 6146.1 rated grades.
You have a pre-motion in writing.
I'll make the same motion for Reading Board of Ed.
Thank you, Megan. Second,
Second.
thank you, Bria.
Same motion.
Second. Great, discussion. Did you want to go first, Mary?
Please, I don't remember if you addressed it in the memorandum, but, if we're repealing these tonight and we're only doing the first reading of the new ones, we're without any policy.
This is the first read repeal. It's a two-step for both.
Okay, okay, fair enough.
So my plan, I know that there was discussion in the policy committee and with the board chairs about a subsequent tri-board meeting at the end of June, where we would have a second reading that would, add and drop. And we make that effective August 1st, for sort of the beginning of the next academic year, so that if there were any oopsies, basically, there was time to fix them.
Any other questions? Okay, let's move to a vote.
Starting at Region 9, in favor? Aye. Aye, passes. 5-0.
Reading, all in favor? Okay.
Easton.
Great. Okay. Do you want to do your motions for the second part?
I know that the Region 9 Board of Education except for first reading, the adoption of the baby and shipment and delivery policy set forth every day will be done and not reading them.
Second.
And motion in Reading,
Same motion?
Bria, thank you. Second, thank you, Megan.
Same motion.
Second.
Great discussion.
Just before we vote as the chair of the policy committee, if anybody has any feedback, questions, concerns after tonight, please circle them, send them to me so that they can be addressed before our subsequent tri-board to adopt.
Thank you, Chris.
And not a question, but from the policy work, I believe you said in your email today, just for public record, that you've gone through with attorney and superintendent made any language changes.
Yes, just to summarize for the benefit of the public, the process involves taking the shipment and goodwill model template policies and revising them in as much as there are blanks for school district name. And there are blanks for title of Title IX officer and things like that. And in certain circumstances, there are optional language. And where we already adopted these policies, we took the same optional language and carried it through. And there were probably 2 or 3 instances where there was a local policy and a regional policy. And we found a way to conform it. So you'll see for Easton and Reading only, this language, for Region 9, this language. It all sits on one policy so that nobody has split between them.
Okay.
If there are other questions, we can.
Region 9, in favor? 5-0.
Reading, all in favor? Great. 5-0.
Good.
Okay, great. Next item on the agenda is item D, updates to joint committees. So just to start this, I have a list of, okay, is that on the screen too? So I think, why don't we just start by going through each committee and making sure that we've listed all of our committee members correctly here. So on the joint operating committee, Jeff Parker was elected the chair. From Reading, we have Megan and Shirag. From Easton, we have Alicia and Jeff. And then from Region 9, we have Gwen and Karen. That's all correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. The Central Office Negotiating Committee, John Stinson was elected the chair. We don't have that marked just yet. But with Region 9, we have John and Cheryl. From Easton, we have Devin and Jeff. And then from Reading, we have Amanda, and the other seat is vacant. Does anyone want to take that seat or? So. I'll appoint myself to the Joint Central Office Negotiating Committee. For the Joint Policy Committee, Chris Parkins left at the chair. From Region 9, we have Chris and Kathy. From Easton, we have Jeff and Alicia. And in Reading, we have Bria, and the other seat is vacant. Would anyone like to fill that seat? Otherwise, we have to take that seat as well. That's Reading. Yeah. Okay, so with that, Megan, or appoint Megan to the Joint Policy Committee. Thank you. The other two committees, the Joint DEI Task Force and the Joint Wellness Committee, at our last tri-board meeting, we discussed dissolving these committees. Either, I think for the Joint Wellness Committee, we had talked about that might not be a requirement to have that be a board committee, but rather it be something that's done by the administration. And then with the DEI task force, we sort of talked about whether the task force had, completed its purpose and was, meant to be a non-permanent committee. So I think both of those, we can discuss dissolving them. If anyone wants to jump in with any questions, or is anyone opposed to dissolving either of these committees? I think in general, we want to have fewer committees. That's what is best for us and our administration. So does anyone have a desire to keep either of those? Or it looks like maybe we have a wellness committee requirement. Who's that?
Stephanie has some
Oh, do you want to say?
information on what joint was.
Okay, great.
The last time this was discussed, there were some questions whether this was a statutory requirement. So I have done my best to review both documents that date back to 2005, when the Wellness Committee was first formed, along with the requirement of a wellness policy. And I've done my best to summarize it here. So there is indeed a requirement for the boards of education that participate in the National School Lunch Program to develop and maintain a wellness policy. There is, however, no requirement that the local boards of education maintain a formal wellness committee. Now, we go to the next stage. While there's no requirement, our joint committee functionally has served as an opportunity that includes parents, students, representative of the food authority, teachers of physical education, school health professionals, school board administrators, and the general public to participate in the development, implementation, and update of the local wellness policy. There is nothing to say that that has to be an official board committee, but functionally, those are the people who serve on the committee and provide a lot of input into the implementation, really, in terms of health and wellness in our schools. We talk about the menu, we talk about any changes to the cost of the lunches, and we receive a lot of input from a varied group of people. So you can see the list there of the committee members.
Each board has its own wellness committee. Statement action.
No, each,
You don't have-
it is a joint committee only, and typically we meet twice a year. One of those meetings always includes a menu review, often a tasting. And then we also talk about any kind of legislative updates. The person who serves in Mr. D'Agostino's current position always provides input. We always hear from Chartwell's. It's a constructive conversation that typically lasts for about an hour, twice a year. Right, the students always provide their input as participants in the food service program in terms of their experiences. And the state, if you want to go on to the next slide, has a number of requirements for the policies. So you can include there the goals, nutrition guidelines, inform and update the public. So functionally, the committee, because the committee provides a lot of input into that wellness policy, review, revision, and then they also participate in the annual assessment of the policy, which is called WellStat now. That's what that group of people does twice a year when they get together.
Does the committee help or hinder, or is it relevant to the administration?
say it's helpful, and I would say once a year is probably an adequate number of meetings for that committee. It is helpful to hear the input of a community member, of a pediatrician, of our PE teachers, et cetera.
The spin on that question is it helpful, hurtful, or different that it's a formal board committee with all of the requirements of it?
I would say it probably is more hurtful, because if it continues to exist as a joint committee and the group needs to approve anything, it's challenging to have a quorum of all three. So it is functionally more efficient to have it not be an official board committee.
Is there a mechanism for that to happen? Is there any precedent or structure through which we can ensure that there is input from important stakeholders without it being a formalized committee?
Oh, I think it can be a committee, it's just not a board committee, right? So we have climate committees, we have a number of different committees that aren't necessarily official board committees. So, I would recommend that we maintain the same representatives in that group. And we just no longer make it an official board committee, if that's, that's the desire of the boards.
Well, that just releases you from meeting forum.
Right.
So it's easier.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, but functionally, the meeting is the same.
But I think it also would mean that there's no official requirement to approve anything amongst that group. Right?
There really isn't.
Right.
They actively
They don't make
participate,
decisions.
they don't
Right.
make any decisions. They actively participate in the policy process. And the last time this occurred, in my role, I then passed on that recommendation to the policy committee, and then the policy committee has some. They review the responses that we receive in the WellStat triannual assessment. We really talk about how we better the experience in our school cafeterias. Those are the kind of conversations.
And by not being a formal board committee, you conduct business by email too, instead of getting everybody to.
The last time we met, I think there were 3 or 4.
There were a few people. That was probably the lowest attended of any of our meetings, honestly.
So we didn't vote on it. Okay. Thanks. Go ahead.
Sorry, no, go ahead.
I was gonna say something about DEI, so.
No, I was just gonna make it formal, like maybe we should move this to a non-formal, formal thing.
Yeah, my question is gonna be, if we did the same thing with DEI.
Right.
You would still be able to have any type of DEI committee. Even with the same group of people, I think.
I think it's problematic to call it a committee because it creates
It's not.
confusion within the, yeah, whatever, well, I mean, whether it's DEI or it's wellness, I think
Yeah,
if it's not a board committee, we probably should just call it something else so that we're not creating confusion and getting unnecessary FOIA requests and things like
Yeah.
that. But I agree, it seems like DEI was created for a reason. And I think we all agree, we want every student to be treated fairly, we want an environment that's free of racism and all of that. I think we all share that. I think same thing for wellness, we believe in, making sure that we're creating the sort of most nutritious environment in every literal and figurative way. But how do we make sure, how do we make it an unofficial thing?
You just call it advisory.
And then call an advisory group.
I like that a lot. Yeah. Is that a thing that we can do? That we can,
They can do it.
is that policy?
It's under the administration,
Yeah.
not under the board, so they can call it whatever.
Yeah.
They want.
Yeah, but please don't call it a committee because it creates confusion.
Advisory panel.
Yeah, but I don't mean them calling it something, I mean, how do we make sure that it actually happens? Because we still care deeply about these subjects, we're being told that it's more efficient and effective for us to change the way that we're sort of participating, right, the way that we live in stakeholders. And I can accept that, but I also want to make sure that it actually happens. So what mechanism do we use?
We're talking about two slightly different things here. The wellness committee, I think, is a creature of this school health, the school lunch program. It only exists because there's this USDA or
There's
Connecticut
one that-
requirement. And the statute says you need something, so we put something together and 20 years later, we still have some cobbled together thing. And The question on wellness is, how do we serve the function that is required by the statute? And the current framework doesn't work for a variety of reasons, but we can still make sure that we are interfacing with the wellness policy, and we're making sure that food safety and food nutrition is all well and good. And if the three boards trust delegating that to the administration without formal board intervention, that's all well and good. No pun intended. On the DEI side, though, I think it's a slightly different conversation, because I think that was born not through statute, but through sort of both board and community desire and request. And we have to have a different conversation about where that fits in the framework, why it fits in the framework, and how it fits in the framework. And so I see them as different. And what I recall in January was we talked about merging them effectively, because we said, well, we need a wellness policy. Let's cover the DEI issues in wellness and not have two kind of teeter-tottering committees that have too many people and not enough time to meet, and let's do it in one. I think we can solve the wellness issue by delegating it to administration and letting them handle that. I would be reluctant to demote, for lack of a better word, DEI to be an internal school district committee at this point. I would rather say, okay, we've determined that we can't merge it with wellness and we're gonna get rid of wellness as a formal board committee. Now let's go back to, maybe the answer is to go to the DEI committee and say, I think we all more or less agree that it's unwieldy at its size. How can we refine its mission and its charge, just like we recharge all the other committees in January, and say, here's the targeted areas in which we think we can be effective as a committee, and then bring that back to the board to have a conversation about, instead of abolishing it and then talking about rehabilitating it. That would be my preferred choice.
And just, the DEI work, if you did remove that as a committee, would probably continue under our Safe School Climate Committee. So even consent, it would operate in that. If we've got, that's a very successful school-based committee that meet health.
School and district. So the school-based committees meet monthly.
Right.
And then the district committee meets about every 2 months.
I think it's probably a valuable conversation to have the board, DEI committee, the administration kind of say, what are the objectives overall and what buckets do they fit into? And how are we making sure we're hitting those targets? Because that might allow the DEI committee's work to be more focused and refined. Because I think part of its issue now is not so much mission creep, but sort of lack of mission focus. And if it had a little bit more of a mission focus, because it was an understanding that administration was doing 1 through 6 and they could handle 7 through 10, I think both sides can be more effective.
I don't see the DEI committee work as being board work, though. I see that as more of an administrative responsibility, and I think that if we leave it as a board committee, I think that what really ends up happening is that we continue to burden the administration in ways that we don't need to. And that's my major concern. I think that the administration has expressed a desire to have fewer and more efficient committees, and I'm not able to really see the necessity for a board committee on DEI. Is DEI met this year or last?
We've met 2 or 3 times this year, so we meet as needed. I think part of what Chris is saying is part of our challenge is that the scope of the charge is so large. I think we have worked at one point to refine to better be connected to the school safety, the safe schools committees. So I think there's opportunity to, before we abolish something, to revisit like why. I mean, that committee was started before I was on the board, but to kind of go back, understand, refocus or refine the charge with the support of the administration. I don't think this, at first, this committee meet monthly. I think that was really burdensome. I think if you meet quarterly and there's a clear focus around why are you meeting, what are we talking about? I do think there is a need for a board level committee. I do think there's a lot of interest in some of the topics, but I do also realize that the charge makes it like almost unburdensome in terms of just creating an agenda, because it's not clear what you're really supposed to meet about. We've tried, but there was definitely good conversation around like what is some of the PD that we're doing. What are the teachers talking about and learning about, which was really the focus of some of our meetings earlier this year. I do think it's very hard in the current number, if you look at like the number of people on the committee, to try to get a quorum and find a date when folks can make it unless we do it virtually, which folks have said we really want to do this work in person. It has been challenging to find a quorum at times.
I think it also, if you're trying to recruit faculty, that don't look like what already that this community looks like, I think abolishing the DEI community sends a message that we're not particularly welcoming. So I do think from a recruiting standpoint, I think it's an important committee to have.
Well, just, again, just if we abolish, sorry, we're dissolving a committee at the board level. That doesn't mean that the work stops, but it takes away various, you know, restrictions like having a forum or needing to meet, and when you don't necessarily need to meet, or having, you know, a certain group of people like board members or whatever that might be. And I guess I don't see a reason why, like, are there specific recommendations that we would be looking to come out of the committee? Because in my time, we haven't had any recommendations come to the board from the DEI committee, and to me, that's really what creates the necessity for a committee, is one that's going to do work and bring recommendations to the full boards. But I haven't seen that come out of DEI since I've been board. So that just sort of makes me wonder why it's not an administrative committee that they can run meetings when there's a need, they can do research and get input when it's needed. So I do understand the optics, but I think as long as we're very clear that dissolving a committee does not mean that we don't believe in the work. It just means that it's more burdensome to run it through the boards of education, and it creates more work for our administration to do the same thing.
I think we could ask for a very specific recommendation from the committee for the boards, and that recommendation should be, should you still exist? And if so, in what form and why, right? What should your charge be? And I think if the recommendation, if it comes from that committee and it is, no, we don't need to exist, and here's why, this work can be done here, and we have confidence that it can. Great.
Didn't we say that at the last, I mean, we sort of said at the last meeting that we would come back to this, and if we felt like there was a need to keep the committee, then we would keep it.
Right.
But what I'm hearing is that we just want to go back to the committee, so I want to avoid.
Well, did we do
bringing it up
that?
at every tri-board, no.
Okay, so
Well, 'cause at
that,
the last meeting, it wasn't clear, there wasn't a clear next
I
step.
walked out of the last meeting expecting this to be a conversation about merging wellness and DEI.
Yeah,
right.
That was the consensus objective.
Okay,
So,
but if we're talking about having a second read of policy at the end of June, then we set a deadline and we say, that's, let's have this conversation and bottom out and be done with it in June. And in between, we would hope that that committee would meet and give us clear, some clear recommendations. I think it would give, sort of the community a sense that the boards are operating in good faith to make sure that this work that we sort of charged ourselves with is going to get done by the appropriate people. Or that there's a really good reason why the committee should continue to exist with a perhaps very different charge. And maybe membership and we're, get quorum or whatever else.
Yeah, I like that. I think the other thing that came out of our discussion in the January meeting, I think was, Dr. McKinnon said that, similar to what you said tonight, in that some of this work is being done by the wellness, not the wellness, climate.
Yeah.
Climate committee, climate, it's not a committee, but it is a committee.
Right.
And so let's discuss, figure out the overlap. Relook at the charter and say, what's being done over here, and make sure we're not duplicating things. And
Right, it's a list of tasks, and you put it into 3 buckets between wellness, climate, and DEI. And if the DEI bucket is empty, at the end you say, all the tasks have been accounted for. And if it's not, you say that there's still a purpose, but it's been narrowed from the long charge. So you solve the problem either way.
Well, it's not unusual for a DEI mandate to evolve over time, and what it was here for the first 3 years to be different, but I would just say, reading the room of like what people expect from their community and organizations, it says a lot to have that committee exist, especially as more people are moving into the community and as we're recruiting for talent. So it may evolve, it may be less, it can change, but I do think it says something to that committee. It's not always about efficiency.
It sounds like we're reaching a consensus. For a motion, during joint wellness committee.
To do. What,
Motion.
so because we're gonna,
Yeah, so it should involve the wellness.
we're gonna merge wellness.
Not merge,
No.
dissolve to this.
So we're straight dissolving the policy.
Yeah, that's what I want to be clear on.
Yeah.
If we're getting rid of that,
Yeah.
it's not.
That's right. I'll make the motion that the Region 9 Board of Education will usually dissolve their participation in the joint wellness thing, and wellness will be under the purview of administration.
Second,
We have the same motion in writing.
Yes. Thank you, Rita. Second. Thank you, Megan.
Same motion.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay. All in favor and ready? 5-0.
Okay, and then related to the DEI task force, I think the plan would be that task force will meet sometime between now and hopefully the next tri-board meeting in June. Do we have a date for that already?
end of June.
I thought it was the same as the Reading end of year meeting, was going to be consolidated, was the preliminary discussion.
25th. 25th. Oh,
Okay. Great. Right. Anything else on, joint committees before we move on? No. Okay, next item on the agenda is the central office contract. John, do you want to-
I think it's a quick update, and then I think we're gonna table this, and we're gonna have the joint, negotiating committee meet again for a little internal strategy, but we had an initial conversation with Dr. McKinnon last Tuesday. Really sort of fruitful conversation where we reviewed all the contracts that are to be discussed. And we also talked a little about what we think might be a viable position for Dr. McKinnon's contract. So I think the next step is for that committee to meet, talk about our negotiating position, and then make a recommendation to the board. We hope to be able to do that in that same June 25th meeting, and to be able to come to terms and agree to all those contracts in that meeting.
John? Anyone else from the committee want to say anything? Okay,
No action from any of those.
Not tonight. No.
Okay, next item on the agenda is joint board committee reports. So, John, just give us an update on the central office negotiating committee, the joint policy committee we covered fully tonight, and the joint operating committee. We discussed calendars already. Was there anything else that committee?
We've discussed, food service and calendars.
Okay, great. All right. Is there any board member comment in writing?
Generally, appreciation for the efficiency of this meeting is at 7:42. And I think that part of that is a result of the work of the joint committees as reconstituted. Everything in this agenda is a recommendation of a committee. And we've all sat here and respected the recommendations of each other's hard work to get here. And it allowed us to get through all this relatively quickly. So thank you.
Good.
I do want to just quickly thank, my fifth grader went on Nature's Classroom last week. And I just want to send a huge thank you to the administration at Samuel Staples Elementary School. I mean, this is like a trip that's been going on in Easton. There's, moms my age who went on this trip if they grew up in Easton. But I think it is like something that is quite atypical for fifth graders to go on this like step up experience and trip. And it takes a lot of effort from the administration, from the fifth grade team and teachers to, support the students as they go on this journey and like go away from home probably for really one of the first times ever. And I mean, my son was a little nervous about going, but had great support from, Miss Fox Santora and his teacher, and really had a lovely trip and was actually convincing his fourth grade friends that they should absolutely go next year. But I do think it's this really interesting rite of passage that Easton provides for its students, and it's a lot of work and dedication from our team and from our teachers. And so I just want to extend a huge thank you to the team for doing this basically every year except for COVID.
At the risk of extending the meeting, thank you to Dr. Pearson Duval for all your work and effort and years putting up with this. This.
In your honor, this
Individual
meeting.
boards
Yes.
and everything else, but formally, thank you, I'm sure everybody has.
But I'm doing this year.
We're gonna keep doing it all. But thank you.
Do you guys need to adjourn first then?
I will do the adjourn at 7:00.
To do it then. Chris, John, second. Mrs. John?
Yeah.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Jeff.
Second.
Seven, thank you. We're adjourned.
Ready? Motion to adjourn, Rita, seconds, Megan, 7:45, we're adjourned.